Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, your posts on Facebook and Instagram will soon be food for AI.
They want it to train their artificial intelligence, and if you don't agree, well then too bad. You can't say no.
Should you be concerned? I'm Natasha Del Toro, and this is The Take. Meta, the parent company of Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and WhatsApp, has been busy recently improving its artificial intelligence products.
On June 26, Meta will take its Facebook and Instagram users' data from as far back as 2007 and feed it into their hungry AI learning machine to better train it to power chatbots and image generators.
And this is just the beginning.
Meta will be updating their privacy policy to allow their AI systems to use personal content posted by users. And this plan has created controversy around the world. Regulators in Europe have asked Meta to suspend it. Breaking it all down for me is Luca Bertuzzi.
I'm a senior AI correspondent at MLex. I've been working on digital policy and AI policy for the past 3 years.
We're so excited to talk with you about this today. So, Luca, what does this mean?
So what we are seeing is that the AI market has seen a huge hype ever since the public release of ChatGPT. And now basically investors, users, they're all out for AI. And we see that companies that include AI in their business plans are getting rewarded by investors, and those who don't get punished. Now, of course, those who have access to data like Meta want to capitalize on them and feed their algorithm with this data. So it is all too natural to see Meta trying to use this sort of special position they have in the tech sector as a leading social media platform provider to feed into these large language models. Now, what we are seeing right now is that the AI market is competing in this space of large language models to have ever more powerful models. So more powerful models means more data centers, more powerful algorithms, and more data.
So, Meta has like billions of users around the world. So if they're looking to train their AI using content, this is such a massive amount of data that they have access to. But maybe you could explain to me, how will they be using that personal content, and what would it look like for them to use your personal content to train their artificial intelligence models?
Yeah, so it's going to be a bit of crystal balling because it's not immediately clear. What we know is that Meta has been leading the world in terms of targeted advertising that were built on extensive user profiling. So, for instance, whether you put like on a certain articles or whether you attended an event. This information was used by Meta to build a certain user profile that then they could sell to advertisers. Now, it's clear that AI helps targeting to become more precise. And it's clear that what Meta is going for are highly personalized AI-powered services. What we are seeing is that AI will probably become a personal assistant for everyone. That's what ChatGPT has been used for extensively.
So if I post something on Facebook or I like something on Facebook, they can actually use my responses or reactions to things to train their AI program. That's what we're talking about here. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's not only that, it's everything you post, every reaction you have online, even the time you interact with posts, everything is fed into Meta's algorithm. They know exactly when you're most likely to engage with content, what type of content is more engaging for you, and so on and so forth. So every single interaction you have on Meta's platform is recorded and it's used to extract data. And this data can very well be used to train AI.
Wow. And what's the case that Meta is making for using the user's personal content, our personal content, to train its AI model?
Well, they just say it's for AI technologies, which is as vague as it can go. Of course, if you want personalized services, if you want a personal assistant and so on, you need to give your personal data. The question is, do people get to have a choice about it? So if you take ChatGPT, for example, it has been trained basically on the entire internet. Now, it's impossible to ask everyone on the internet, do you agree to this or not? The difference with Meta is that Meta has users. And so it is feasible for Meta to ask for their consent. In Europe, the idea is that there should be a consent-based system. Otherwise, Meta would have probably not suspended the program. In the rest of the world, well, in the absence of similar laws, there is no other choice for users. They just have to accept it. In Europe, you have a strong data protection regime. And so European authorities have looked at Meta's approach that is not based on consent, but on giving people the possibility to opt out. Here we are on a gray legal area. No one has done this before. And it seems that the majority of data protection authorities in Europe don't think this is legal. And that is why Meta has suspended this change of privacy policy and this AI program in Europe and not in other regions.
Yeah, and we understand, I think it's understandable that there have been concerns about all of this and what it could imply for people that use Facebook regularly. It's uploading a lot of very personal content. And so people have gone on social media to push back against Meta's plans, and they're sharing ways to opt out.
I personally don't. You can opt out, and they're making it a little difficult to do so. So I'm going to show you how to do that.
And maybe you tried to follow the steps and then realized that you couldn't.
And people think that their opt-out process is going to save them from that. It won't.
So Meta had to put their plans on hold in Europe after it came under watchdog complaints.
Well, I think Meta's example is just the latest example of managing to pause the program of one of the most powerful companies in the world and saying, let's figure this out together before you launch your program on your own terms. And the European Union has recently passed legislation that will regulate large language models and will ask, providers like Meta and OpenAI to manage societal risk, to put in place some, due diligence obligation to avoid that these models are used to harm people and to harm society at large. I think that the Europeans are simply the most advanced in this area because they already had legislation and they had been working on new rules on AI. So there is certainly a lot of interest also from other jurisdictions on what the EU is doing.
After the break, what can you do to opt out? Luca, Meta has already been using AI to learn user behavior for years. This isn't entirely new, right? And their head of global business group, Nicola Mendelsohn, said the aim is to provide content catered to each user.
We've been working with AI since really back to 2006 with the introduction of Feed. And we use it in 3 different ways. So we use it to surface and bubble up in the feeds the best content for you, that individual of those 3.8 billion people, to see the things that matter most to you.
So they want to improve the user experience with AI. How different is that from what Meta is trying to do with AI training now?
Well, AI is just a more sophisticated way of offering personalized services, which Meta had been doing already. The point of large language models is that what people need to understand is that in the coming years, you won't have companies building an AI from scratch. They will be building them on top of a large language model. So the large language models will be the language of AI in the future. We will have 4, 5, maybe 6 large language models on which all AI applications will be based. So it's clear that Meta wants to enter this space and wants to be an active player in this. Because, of course, then they can also offer more personalized services, but the idea is to enter this strategic race for being those writing the language of the future of AI.
And they have, again, access to so many people. So that's just an unimaginable amount of data that they would have access to.
We also have to keep in mind that a lot of people on Meta's platform are deceased. There is a unidentified number of people on Facebook, for example, that are dead, and their data keep being used for these purposes. Probably will also be used for training AI.
And something that I've been thinking about a lot, as I learn more about this, Meta has been using our content for years, and consumers, we've been putting up with this for a long time now. Do you think most people that use Meta are even aware of the ways in which their content is being used?
Well, I think Facebook was born out of the idea of connecting people. What people didn't realize at first is that also means if you're not paying for a product, you are the product. And so every interaction you do on Facebook, on Instagram, so on, is commodified and commercialized for advertising purposes. Maybe that was not clear at first, but it should be clear by now. I think what people are less aware of is, for instance, that their data is being used also when they use WhatsApp. It's not the content that they share, but it's all the data about that communication. So where are you located? When are you communicating? With whom? How often? And I think this goes much more into the background, but this is also very valuable data that Meta extracts.
So they wouldn't be using, on WhatsApp, they wouldn't be using personal messages. Is that correct?
No, because those are encrypted.
Now, one thing that, in preparation for this story that we decided to try and do was to see if we could opt out of having Meta use our personal content. So we went in, our lead producer, Sarí el-Khalili, tried to opt out by chatting with the Meta AI assistant. So he had plugged in, how can I opt out of AI?
So here's what I got from Meta. Your feedback is valuable to us. While Meta can't currently exclude individual users from training data, we're continuously working to improve our AI models and appreciate your input. So basically, it sounds to me like a no.
So that's what Meta responded to him. For me, when I plugged in, please delete my content from AI, the response was that they would delete my content, that they would not use my content. So we're getting wildly different responses from Meta about how they will use our content. How can we trust anything they tell us if they're giving us such wildly different responses?
Yeah, that's a great point. And, the fact that they say we cannot take individuals' data out of this data set, that's simply not right, because they can do it for Europeans. So they must be able to do it also for users based elsewhere. So, in Europe, you had the option to opt out, but it was quite hidden. So we received a notification saying, we are changing our privacy policy. If you want to know more, click here. And then there were several layers, like learn how you have a right to object. And then you had to fill in this form to say, look, I want to opt out, and provide a justification for that, even if it's your right. So, I think Meta probably didn't manage this very well. It could have been managed better.
So, Luca, What should a concerned user do then? Somebody who does not want their personal content being used to train these models, not being sure what could come from that, right? I mean, does deleting posts or deactivating accounts work?
That's the thing. If your account is deactivated, you don't really have a say on what Meta does with the data. So I don't really have an answer for you. Meta would be the right person to ask this question. I think, if you're in Europe, you have more rights. And if you are not, then you have to suck it up, I'm afraid.
And is Meta required to notify users in the United States?
There is no law obliging them to.
You yourself said it earlier that if you're not paying for a product, then by default, you are the product. I mean, this is something that we heard over and over again in the movie that came out about Facebook, Meta, called The Social Dilemma. Are Meta's users Mark Zuckerberg's products?
Well, I think their personal data is. And the profiling that Meta builds for advertisers is the product. So, we also need to be conscious that when we use a certain service that is great, it's for free, it brings people together. Sometimes it tears them apart as well if you look at harmful content online. We need to be conscious that every action online leaves a certain footprint. And that footprint can be commercialized, or it can also be used against us if we are not careful.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Sarí el-Khalili and Tamara Khandaker, with Chloe K. Lee, Khaled Soltan, Mohammed Zain Shafi Khan, and me, Natasha Del Toro, in for Malika Bilal. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back.